Hey everybody, welcome into Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside our Georgia recruiting reporter, Jeff Sintel. Thanks for joining us today. I don't know about you, Jeff, and I don't know about you guys, but I am still absolutely reeling from that Florida-Georgia victory in Jacksonville on Saturday, an absolute romping 42-7. Ooh, that feels good. And I'm jealous because I didn't get invited to Jacksonville. Jeff was there. Tell us what it was like, the environment, the atmosphere. That had to just be a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
It was crazy, and I guess we should probably say aftermath of that victory, there's going to be some recruiting rankings destroyed maybe over the next 3 weeks instead of property destruction. But we got the chance to go there and see 42-7. I called it on their Facebook Live show afterward. I called it a systematic dismantling of the Florida program. My good buddy Brandon Adams said the St. Johns River was filled with gator tears that night. Georgia in a big way, 42-7. That's the biggest victory against Florida since '82. And ironically, the last time Georgia was 8-0 was way back in 1982. So everybody out there, think about what you were doing the last time Georgia was that good, and that's 1982. And that turns back the clock for a lot of folks.
Well, you mentioned recruiting rankings, and looking ahead to 2019, right now, Florida, of all teams, sits at #1 in the nation in recruiting with 12 commits. Georgia is at #2, so right now they're vying for 1 and 2 in the nation in that category. And what does a statement win like that over Florida do for recruiting?
Yeah, I think that's, most people, like, the knee-jerk recruiting reaction is, okay, Florida just got destroyed by Georgia. Florida lost their coach. Does that mean Georgia's going to take huge advantage here? Well, the reality is it's going to help jockey for the rankings, because you mentioned 2019, and that's where Georgia was #2 overall in the rankings, and Florida sits at #1. Well, in the 2018 rankings, I'm sure that's where all those short-term recruiting fans think about. Georgia just jumped over Florida for #1 in the SEC for 2018 and #5 overall. They just jumped over Florida with a recent commitment on Thursday, and now I think what's going to happen is you're going to see that Gator recruiting class kind of wither away. Some of their commitments will be peeled off the board, and I think Florida's chances of chasing Georgia and catching Georgia in both of those measures have diminished considerably.
Yeah, so with the firing of head coach Jim McElwain, what does that do to shake it up even further?
Well, I guess you're going to look at all those Florida commitments that were like a guy like Jamar Chase. He's a wide receiver that's committed to Georgia. That might be the one name you'd kind of pull out of the hat and say that's a guy that Georgia and Florida are both going after. But I think most Georgia fans would think that anything that hurts Florida's recruiting pipeline is a good thing for the SEC East and the dominance going forward right there. I think Georgia is surging in recruiting in 2018 and 2019. They couldn't put together a better product on the field than they're doing right now. Recruits are noticing, but they're more so noticing Georgia all season, and this is just Florida getting a little bit weaker while the Bulldogs get a lot stronger.
Well, Georgia got its 7th homegrown commit today, and they're all among the ESPN's top 250. That's just absolutely outstanding. But today, we had a big commit in Jalen Perry, and he did it over Twitter. I think it's so funny when they make their big commitment over Twitter. And we do have the tweet of when he officially committed to Georgia, so that was just today. He says, "First, I want to thank God for the gifts and opportunities that he has blessed me with. Next, I would like to thank my family, friends, teammates, and coaches that have had an impact on my life with love and support. I'm so grateful for every single one of you for helping me to become the player in person I am today. And lastly, I want to thank all of the coaches that have given me an opportunity to play for their school. After lots of prayer and conversation with my family, I believe that the right decision has been made. With that said, I'm excited to announce I'm officially committed to the University of Georgia." And of course, he is a 4-star junior cornerback from Decula, Georgia. Big and rangy cornerback is what he is described as on DawgNation. How big is that?
Well, first of all, Hannah, I'm really impressed by that entire commitment script you just nailed. I think there's some recruiters out there that need an eye chart to figure out, which players are actually really good. You definitely, my lady, do not need an eye chart to figure out that commitment script. But I could probably go on all Facebook Live for about 25 minutes about Jalen Perry, about the benefits and how it helps Georgia. I think the bullet points are here. Number one, Jalen Perry, he does a very interesting decision. He goes and visits Georgia for the Missouri game on October the 14th. The following weekend, he goes October 21st to Alabama. The following weekend, this past weekend, he visits Ohio State. So it was basically a back-to-back-to-back. You want to call it Survivor Series or an elimination round. He gets through with that trip to Columbus, even though that was a thrilling win with Penn State, and he decides he wants to be committed to the G. He commits to Georgia, and this is another example of those length that Georgia wants. They want those size athletes. They want those guys that can cover those 6'4", 6'5" receivers. Now, Jalen's about 6'1", about 185. His Final Four was South Carolina, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. Now, the interesting part about his story, I spoke to his coach this morning, and his coach kind of told me, this is what you need to know about Jalen. Everybody calls him JP. You got to have a cool nickname if you're going to be a good player. Nobody's going to just call you, that's Jalen Perry. But here's the thing. The thing I like about the Jalen Perry story is there's a spring practice earlier this year, and there is a coach that just slaps him on the back and says, good job, or whatever. And Jalen was oblivious to that. He had his head down. He went back into the huddle and went and repped another play. And Jalen got with his head coach afterward, and he said, listen, I just want the focus right now to be on my team, not me. That was a singular moment if I would have kind of jumped up and down when somebody was giving me congratulations. I'm just really focused on our team right now. If you notice, Jalen Perry is not a huge fan of the recruiting process whatsoever. You'll notice the guys that get it done in 2019 really early. I mean, Jalen Perry could probably have went another 15, 16 months with this thing. Big things for Georgia is he is their 7th homegrown commitment, pushes them to #2 in the nation and #2 in the SEC. And he is another homegrown kid. Georgia has 7 commitments for 2019. Every one of those guys are a top 250 player. Every one of those guys are Georgia homegrowns. But the big thing for Georgia is there are so many blue chip talents in the state of Georgia this year for 2019 in that recruiting class that I think that's the year. I'm not going to feed you any notion they're going to win it up. They're going to get the #1 recruiting class in 2018. 2019 is the year, and Jalen Perry has great momentum on that front.
So Perry today, James Cook was last Thursday. It seems like every week some big name player is committing to Georgia. Before we get to Cook, who's next for the 2019 Georgia recruiting class?
Well, everybody's eyes right now are on Owen Popo. Owen Popo is a guy that got offered way back in 2015, I think. That was, you have to look back and figure it. I think maybe Bruno Mars had his first big hit way back in 2015. That was before he went to high school, of all things, as an 8th grader. But you see Owen Popo, he's the nation's #1 outside linebacker for 2019. He's another 5-star. He would be Georgia's potentially 4th 5-star. Now, he's bringing everything down to a top 3 on Halloween. I asked him over the weekend, I said, man, why are you doing that on Halloween? Are you going to come out with a video and you're going to be in this costume and this costume and this costume? And he says, no, it was just an arbitrary day. He picked the day. 2019, I think that's the name, Owen Popo. He's told me before he maybe might do it in January, right before the Under Armour All-American game when he's part of the Future 50. But I also think flips might happen before then. I'm thinking flip watch for a lot of guys like a Robert Cooper. He's out of South Gwinnett. He's committed to Florida State at this time. I'm going to tell Dawg fans to really watch Alontae Taylor. That's a Tennessee commitment. I think he could play anywhere at Georgia, corner, athlete, safety, wide receiver. I think he's going to give Georgia an official visit when everything comes down to it. And also you've got a young man by the name of Luke Ford. Now, Luke Ford may take a while, but he will be visiting Georgia this weekend on an unofficial visit. He's already told me he's going to come back for an official visit later on. And remember, Dawg fans, this was the guy who told me out of the opening that he says, if Justin Fields goes to Georgia, I'm going to go to Georgia. So Luke Ford will be in the house at Sanford Stadium for that South Carolina game. I've got a pretty good idea that Justin Fields will be there as well, just to show him around and kind of give him the ropes a little bit, and maybe the 5-star tour, I guess, for everything at Georgia. So those are some names to think about right there. And again, Georgia football recruiting up and up and up and up.
With Halloween tomorrow, you should have done it in like the shoulder pads. What do they call that? The Spike Squad?
The Spike Squad, yeah. The Savage Golden shoulder pads or whatever. You get a turnover.
He really could have done some cool things with that. We could have made a video for him, so something to think about. Well, let's talk about James Cook. So this was last Thursday. We were on air last Monday, so we missed the big news, but let's talk about him, the #3 running back in the nation right now, according to 24/7 Composite. And not to mention, he has somebody to look up to, his brother Dalvin Cook. Maybe we remember him, broke every career record at Florida State. He's now in the NFL. So he is the #3 running back and committed to Georgia. What does this say about the running back core that continues to develop at Georgia and him committing to the Dogs?
It's kind of like deja vu. It's kind of like Georgia, here they go. And everybody, depending on what ranking service you subscribe to, is he a 4-star? Is he a 5-star? Great googly moogly. All I know is he's the nation's #3 running back. That's really all that matters. Most years that's a 5-star as well, but you have to look at that in Georgia. They're pairing up the nation's #1 running back and the nation's #1 quarterback this year. Now they're pairing up the nation's #1 running back and the nation's #3 running back. He's an FSU legacy. He was just ready to go ahead and commit right now. And Hannah, I love young men that commitment. When they make their commitments, they make it about something greater than themselves. James Cook chose last Thursday to commit to honor his cousin Draquan. He was killed in a tragic drive-by shooting. It was his birthday. Draquan would have been 20 on that day. And so James just thought that would be a good day to kind of mingle in his commitment day with a day that is the birthday of someone that really meant a lot to the Cook family. Those guys were close. They grew up together. I've been told it was a situation where he was just dropping some friends off, wrong place, wrong time. And the family want to make that an even happier day with a lot of sadness. And they chose for James Cook to commit on that day. And I definitely commend that choice.
Yeah, and a second in a row Thursday night commit for Georgia, so maybe we'll get another one this Thursday. But still talking about James Cook, you mentioned the nation's #1 running back. Of course, that is Zamir White. The last time that we saw Georgia pick up the top 5 running backs in the nation, of course, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb. It's kind of like a thunder and lightning a little bit. Who's the thunder out of this?
Yeah, it sounds like an Imagine Dragons song. You know, I know some Dog fans that were playing that song going down to Jacksonville. Thunder and lightning, that's one of the hooks of the song when you get into the chorus. But to me, there's some unique symmetry to this right here because you have Georgia. The last time you go through the record books, the history books, and you want to find out the last time a school picked up 2 running backs in the top 5, it was Chubb and Michel way back in 2014. So you've got those 2 guys, and then the next time it's done, again with pure running backs, they have all-purpose backs, but I'm talking about the pure running backs category in the 24/7 Sports Composite rankings. The last time that was done was Georgia. You got to remember that continues the mojo with guys like Keith Marshall and Todd Gurley. That was when Georgia got a pair of top 10 running backs way back in 2012. Things keep going great for Georgia, and you got to remember, flip those history pages back even further. The last time a school signed anything better than #1 and #3 was 2007 when the USC Trojans signed the nation's #1 and #2 running backs back in 2007. So what Georgia is doing, and I'm going to quote James Cook's mother on this, is simply bananas. What they're doing with recruiting rankings and recruiting is simply bananas.
Well, it seems like they're just going national with their running back recruiting. Can we officially just call Georgia running back U at this point?
I think it was very interesting. I was at that certain game they call the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
That little game.
I think they're going to start calling it the world's largest Georgia thrashing of Florida for the time being. But Knowshon Marino was there. Everybody remembers Knowshon way back when. He was the guy that would, fire off and skyrocket in the end zone on some of those highlight plays. Knowshon was being invited into the Georgia versus Florida Hall of Fame. Excuse me, I get these games mixed up. Hall of Fame game. So he's sitting there watching the new breed of Georgia running backs. He's sitting there watching the latest guys in RBU, that fraternity, and he was mighty pleased to see some of those moves that the new Bulldogs were putting on, kind of keeping up the tradition of those big-time backs. And you got to remember, Knowshon Marino came out of New Jersey, too. He's kind of like DeAndre Swift, another big-time out-of-state back where it's almost like Georgia, when you're talking about running backs, they're going to get whoever they really, really want.
Well, somebody that's going to be opening up holes for these running backs, Jamari Salyer. We're still waiting on his commitment. We do not have anything official. He is a 5-star offensive guard from Atlanta, Georgia. Could be coming soon. He actually had a jersey presentation, All-American jersey presentation at his high school today. You were there. How much fun was that?
Tell you what, you got to hear a big man give a big speech. His mom talked about everything great with Jamari Salyer, and so many things to talk about Jamari. I look at him and I think, in my career, I might have seen 4 or 5 young men where I look at them in high school and I go, yep, that is what an NFL veteran that's going to play about 10 years, 12 years looks like when they're in high school. Jamari Salyer is the nation's #1 OG. That's a nice little thing, right? Nation's #1 offensive guard, the highest rated offensive guard or center interior line prospect since 2006. The #1 overall rated offensive lineman this year, and he was getting his All-American jersey. He'll play in the U.S. Army All-American game out in Texas, San Antonio. Luckily, a recruiting reporter like myself will be there for the River Walk to catch all the action there for again. But Jamari Salyer, I'm talking you, Pace Academy, one of the nation's best ever I've seen do it. A grown man, about 6'4", about 343 pounds. he is a load.
And that All-American game will be in January. But today, you were actually there, like I said, at Pace Academy. And we have the video. So let's take a look at Salyer getting his All-American jersey.
Jamari, on behalf of the Secretary and Chief of Staff of the United States Army, it is my honor to welcome you to the 2018 U.S. Army All-American Bowl.
First, I'd like to thank God for blessing me with the ability to play football and to be the person that I am today. I want to thank my mom. Obviously, she's had like the greatest role ever. I couldn't have asked for a better mom. Couldn't have asked for God to bless me with a greater mom. So I thank her for all she's done. My brother and sister, of course, they're gonna take a lot of credit for everything that I do. I like it like that. I just want to be a good role model for them. Thank my coaches, my teammates. Y'all all inspire me to go out there and give my best effort every Friday night and every day as well. Teachers, past coaches, administrators, all y'all played a great role in my life and made me the person I am today. So thank you all.
Nicole House on Facebook says he has a baby face. I mean, he probably is what, 17, 16, 17?
He's about 18 years old.
18 years old. He looks a little bit younger. So fans, keep your comments rolling in. We're going to get to questions in about 2 minutes. So keep your questions and comments rolling in. But right now, I want to get your thoughts on Salyer and the update on him and if and when he's going to be a Georgia Bulldog.
Yeah, the interesting news he kind of shared with us today. First of all, December the 15th, that's when he's going to make his announcement. He would have the ability to sign within the early signing period on December the 20th. He did not take that visit that he had planned to take, an official visit to Ohio State. He said there was some complications there. Couldn't get that worked out. Here's what we know right now. Jamari Salyer will be at Athens this weekend on an unofficial visit, another unofficial visit. He will take in all things there in the South Carolina game. Another big recruiting weekend for Georgia shaping up. And then he will take his very first official visit the following weekend to Clemson. Clemson and Georgia are the main contenders there for Jamari. And that's going to be for the Citadel game. That's when Clemson wants a lot of their big guys, their big targets, their big official visitors to come in that weekend. It makes a lot of sense. They don't want to prepare for a huge game. So Citadel might not take all-out coaching effort and a lot of, 120% to beat Citadel. I'm just going out on a limb there. But he's got guys like Trevor Lawrence, Xavier Thomas, 2 5-stars for the Clemson class that are recruiting him. He's got guys like Justin Fields, Kearis Jackson recruiting him for Georgia. He is very impressed by what Georgia has done on the football field this year. We'll have some more information about him in tomorrow's Centel's Intel blog. But Jamari Salyer going to be back in Athens again this weekend. Next weekend he's going to be at Clemson, and that is basically the steel cage match or the Rock'em Sock'em's Robots pairing for who's going to get the nation's #1 OG. And I will remind everybody, if you saw that young man speaking today, great personality, great communicator. His coach, Chris Slade, said he's basically a better person than he is a football player. And you guys wait for it. We got our mini documentary, Jamari Salyer, the season. Salyer is going to be there. Chapter 2, we got a mini documentary. Should drop by Wednesday, no later than Wednesday. Look for that everywhere, Dog fans. It's going to be about 13 minutes. You really get to go between the lines inside the locker room. We got Jamari mic'd up for one of his big games so far this season. And the Diehards Network is putting it together, and you guys want to catch that for sure.
I can't wait for that. I know that Tanya Godwin on Facebook can't wait either. She said he would look better in red. Nobody looks good in orange. I completely agree. And that is an exclusive, though, that Clemson and Georgia are his 1 and 2. That's an exclusive just from you, Jeff, right?
Well, he's kind of been hitting about it for a while, but it sounds like now that those are the only 2 official visits he's going to take. He's going to visit Clemson, and he's going to take his official against the Citadel following weekend. Of course, he's got Georgia again. I think this is his 3rd game that he will make this year at Georgia. Highly coveted prospect. I don't think Georgia's recruiting class will be complete and will be bananas, so to speak, without the inclusion of one Jamari Salyer in the class of 2018.
Well, that's the kind of information that you get right here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, so make sure to come back every Monday. But let me give you 3 names with who could be next, the next commit for Georgia. What about Tyson Campbell, Trey Hill, Alante Taylor?
Yeah, we kind of covered some of those names earlier in one of our opening blocks of the show. Who's going to be next? Well, you got a lot of guys with specific timelines there. Again, I keep thinking about flips. The name I'm going to keep telling Dawg fans as many times as we're going to do this show is Tyson Campbell. A lot of people think that that's kind of like hopes and dreams, Dawg recruiting right there. I don't think that at all. I'm not in the crystal ball business, Hannah, but if I were, I would be pointing my prediction towards Georgia to land Tyson Campbell for the class of 2018. Georgia simply has not recruited a player like Tyson Campbell. Any of these bonkers recruiting classes that they put together. He's a 5-star. He's the nation's #3 cornerback. He's about 6'2.5", 187 pounds. He's got 10.4, 10.5 speed in the 100. He is a true lockdown cover cornerback. Big friends with James Cook. Those guys were on the same team together at the opening, the same 7-on-7 team there at the opening. There's a friendship there between those two guys as well. And then you got to think about the name earlier. I'm going to talk to you about that name again earlier. Alante Taylor. He's out of Tennessee, currently committed to Tennessee. Really isn't got a kinship there with Justin Fields. Also is currently committed to Tennessee. He's going to take some official visits. Not really known for sure. He hadn't put it out there whether Georgia will be one of his officials. I think Georgia's going to get one of his official visits, and Georgia likes him all over the place. Likes him as an athlete. Could be a wide receiver. Could be a cornerback. Could be a safety. But if he's told me in the past that he will make all these visits as a Tennessee commit, barring no staff changes at Tennessee, and goodness gracious, that's a crystal ball topic for another Facebook Live in and of itself. Tennessee, what's going on with that coaching staff? Are they going to try and keep up with Florida there in the race for their next head coach? Watch that name, Alante Taylor, folks, and I think Georgia's really in it more than people think.
Great stuff, Jeff. Well, it's time in the show where we're going to get you guys involved, so make sure to send your questions and your comments, and we're getting so many comments coming in on Facebook. I'm going to try to get to them all, but Rick Pop has a really good question. He says, with so many high-caliber athletes committing to the Dawgs, do you think they'll try to gray shirt some 3-stars? And that's a really good point with all the running backs coming in especially.
Yeah, I think the main thing Georgia's going to focus itself on maybe the mid-years first. Those are the guys that are going to enroll early. If you guys remember last season, Tennille Carter was going to be a part of the Georgia class, but nobody expected Nick Chubb and Sony Michel to come back for their senior seasons. I think that's a big reason why Georgia is so successful this year. Maybe that kick-started their progress under Kirby Smart just a little bit. It's going to depend on how many guys can enroll as a mid-year in January. Georgia might not have enough spots for a lot of guys that want to show up. Then there's also the later signing period, and then sometimes some attrition can happen with the program there. Sometimes some spots can open up. But I do think Georgia, as far as they're looking in the class of 2018, they've got 7 slots left. Probably got 12 or 13 guys that could fill those 7. I think names like Jamari Salyer, definitely going to be a name. Luke Ford, Tyson Campbell, going on and on. Channing Tindall maybe, KJ Henry maybe. So those spots will be at a premium. And, of course, Georgia's got to think about its defensive tackles too. A guy like Robert Cooper, maybe a guy like Trevor Trout. One thing to think about now, and I put that on the blog this morning if you guys caught Centel's Intel. There's a name you're not going to see me write a whole lot more going forward with Georgia, and that's Tyreek Johnson. I just don't think Georgia is actively recruiting Tyreek Johnson the way that Ohio State and Clemson and UCLA are right now. I think Georgia has bigger and better targets in mind, at least as far as recruiting rankings go. Tyson Campbell would be one of those names. So I think Georgia, Tyreek Johnson, which maybe a lot of people thought 4 or 5 months ago that Tyreek would eventually join a young man he calls an older brother in Richard LeCount, the 5-star freshman this year on the Georgia roster. I no longer see that happening. I think maybe Tyreek Johnson might end up somewhere else other than Georgia. So that's something to think about as well when you think about how many names are left for those 7 spots for Georgia in 2018.
Well, this one made me chuckle. Santiago Arn asked, will Kirby add McElwain to his staff in any capacity? That makes me just kind of want like this. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I tell you what, Santiago, man, take the high road, man. Punch up, don't punch down. Leave Coach McElwain alone. That's some trolling right there. And, Jim McElwain just didn't work out. Just didn't work out. He won 2 SEC East. I think the lack of player control had a lot to do with that. You saw the issues where a lot of players were suspended. You saw that issue with, I don't think we'll ever know maybe totally about the death threat gate or whether that was actually there or actually substantiated. I did talk to a lot of parents over the last few days about that. And maybe the most concerning thing to them is if their son was on campus and there were death threats being made regarding the program, and the university, the administration, the athletic department were not actively pursuing punishment or trying to bring any of that to light, bring any of that to justice to find the real deal on that, that would worry them. Because that's where you're going to send your young men after all to play college football. And the fact that Florida didn't really make a priority stance or try to kind of root all that out and investigate that. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't happen. I don't know. I don't even think Hannah Chalker knows for sure what happened there.
Nope, I sure don't.
But I think right there was a concern for the Florida program, and I've heard people tell me that when all that stuff washed out and there was no evidence to support it, that was a major blow to the chances of Jim McElwain staying at Florida, regardless of that loss to Georgia over the weekend.
We can just go on record and say that Jim McElwain is not joining Kirby Smart's staff. Let's just go ahead and lay down that.
Not going to happen.
But Santiago does have a good question. So he says, we were talking about flips and decommitments earlier, but he said with all of these new guys that they're signing, they're getting could be a #1 recruiting class in the nation 2019, pushing that way for 2018. Could we see some big decommitments by 3 stars or maybe some people that think they're way down the depth chart?
Yeah, that'll be very interesting, Hannah, because I remember with the Toneel Carter situation, one thing Kirby Smart said is we would never pull a scholarship from a guy. We might delay enrollment, or we might give him another opportunity to enroll. That's something to think about as well. I think Georgia fans, I know it's kind of funny, when we were live streaming Jamari's commitment, his All-American game ceremony presentation today, everybody was wondering, is he committing? What's he doing right now? What is he doing right now? They didn't even read the teaser that said he is accepting his All-American jersey today. I think people just get ahead of themselves. They want, like, you know that movie Spaceballs where there's like ludicrous speed? I think they want ludicrous speed to happen all the time with their recruiting class. I just don't think that's going to happen as yet. I think things will sort themselves out. Everybody's wondering if Georgia will kind of process commitments sort of like Alabama did, or they will let other programs out-recruit them at the end for 3 stars. I'm going to tell you, folks, don't trust those recruiting rankings all the time. If you look and you see Walter Grant playing a lot, he was not rated highly enough to do that. Georgia's highest-rated offensive tackle is redshirting this year. You got to trust your coaches on this one, because the guy you think is a 3-star commitment that Georgia might just brush off, like, you know, brush your shoulders off to get rid of that 3-star or something like that, not really going to happen. A lot of cases, because the evaluation of the Georgia coaches in the program might be a lot different than the evaluation by some of those recruiting services and everything else. That guy you might want to be pawned off to a mid-major program or to maybe an Ole Miss or a Vanderbilt might be a high 4-star in the eyes of the Georgia coaching staff, and that's probably what you need to concern yourself about the most.
Yeah, Philip Jordan Wells says a decommitment would open up 2 more spots for 4 and 5 stars. There's so many questions here that we're just not going to be able to get to all of them, but where can people reach out to you or see more information?
All right, so guys, we've got always Wednesdays, Centel Intel. We've got Centel Intel every day, of course, but Wednesday Night Live, sponsored by those good folks at Kroger. Those guys are bringing you guys the click list, everything you can do to get your groceries when you come home. You just do it from your smartphone. You pull into a lane at your favorite Kroger, and they're going to bring your click list groceries out to you. It's kind of like the way Georgia's recruiting right now. Kirby Smart and the staff is going on there and click listing. We want this #1 running back. We want this #3 running back. We want this 5-star. And they just bring out that commitment right out to them through Twitter. So that's something to keep up with us on. The blog's up every day. Pay attention, guys, that Jamari Salyer season documentary, Chapter 2. It's going to be about 13 minutes. Bring your popcorn, bring your pause button if you want to. That's going to be a pretty big effort. I'm so proud of the work of the Die Hards Network and what we've been able to put together with like a kind of a chronology of his season. Jamari is a really great player. Hope you guys get a good look at that. Should drop no later than Wednesday, but when it does drop on DawgNation, follow me on Twitter at jeffcentel.com. I will point you to it like a gateway with a big arrow sign and says, all right, Jamari Chapter 2, chop it up.
And before we go, I know we're running a little heavy here, nice TV term for running late. Let's take a full screen look at all of the commitments that Georgia has for the 2018 class and just a nice recap of who they have. I'm being told that we do not have the full screen, but a quick recap of who Georgia has and the numbers there.
Yeah, Georgia's got 17 commitments right now. They've got 2 5-stars. I'm going to throw out, I think the number might push all the way up to 4 or 5 stars in the end. They got the nation's #1 quarterback in Justin Fields, the nation's #1 running back in Zamir White, the nation's #3 running back in James Cook. They got a 3-star, 6'7" tight end out of Marist High School. They've got the nation's #5 center in Warren Erickson out of North Gwinnett High School. That guy's a hulking brute. He could play tackle, he plays guard or center. They've got the nation's #2 outside linebacker in Adam Anderson. They call him AA, the A-bomb. They've got Chris Smith. They call him Agent Alpha of the League of Shadows. He's a 4-star cornerback out of Hateville Charter in Ellenwood, Georgia. They've got lots of players coming out of their ears. They've got 2 defensive tackles committed. Devontae Wyatt, everybody remembers Devontae Wyatt. He was a non-qualifier in 2017. He's going to show up in January when he gets his 2 Bs in junior college. He's going to be a defensive tackle. Tremel Walthar is a 3-star defensive tackle out of Liberty County in Hinesville, Georgia. A lot of defensive guys coming together. They've also got a 3-star name, Rashad Wild Goose. Now, isn't that a great thing for play-by-play announcers everywhere?
Earlier. That's a good one.
Wild Goose Chase. And, Hannah and I covered, like, thunder and lightning with the running backs. And, the guy that's thunder is the guy that also is the Greek god Zeus of lightning. And then the other guy's the lightning bolts.
Now
Sounds
we have
like
a wild goose.
We've got a wild goose, and wouldn't it be great if anybody if Wild Goose ever like picks off a ball and he's trending towards the end zone for a pick 6, and some brilliant Brad Nessler call says it's a wild goose chase to the end zone. Will Florida catch him for another touchdown? Having fun here.
You heard it here first. So.
Having fun here on Before the Hedges.
All right, so 17 commits for Georgia. James Cook on Thursday, Jalen Perry today. They just keep rolling in, so join us here every single Monday, 5 o'clock. We're live on DawgNation for Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger. Thanks so much, Jeff Sintel. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'm Hannah Chalker. We'll see you next Monday.